So hi, good morning or good afternoon from wherever you are. My name is Adrian Choo. I'm from Singapore. I'm the CEO, founder of Career Agility International. We are a team of very experienced career coaches based in Singapore, but we do service our clients within the region and globally as well. So I'll give you a little bit more of introduction about myself as we go into the next slide. But Neil, do I jump on the presentation straight away now, or
go for it? Yeah, just jump straight in.
So thanks for joining in on the second last segment of the marathon that has been 24 hours long. It's been exciting. The topics have been really eye-opening for me. The last session by Gina on Clubhouse, it made me feel like a dinosaur. So but one of the things we wanted to talk about today is a bit less about the tactical bits of like the CVs, LinkedIn, social media. I want us to take 2 or 3 steps back to look at the career strategies that are involved when you are looking at a mid-career switch. And we're not just talking about a normal career switch, we're talking about mid-career switch, because honestly, when you are in your 20s or early 30s, career switch is not that difficult, painful, but not that difficult. But the moment you hit what we call the mid-career stage, it does get a bit tricky from a logistics perspective, from a risk perspective, and from an acceptability perspective by the employers. So today we're going to talk about 5 things you need to think about before making a mid-career switch. And the reason why we're talking about that as well is because we are seeing an increase. Our practice has been seeing almost a 2-fold increase than compared to 2018 of people and of our clients wanting to make mid-career switches. And the common reasons for people making a switch to another field or another role, by and large, has been because of COVID. And not just because of COVID, but even before COVID struck, there was a lot of disruptions. And as a result, we have retrenchments going on and jobs that have effectively disappeared. So what we are looking at is we're looking at jobs going away and not coming back. I know in the old days, I don't know about the other places, but in Singapore especially, when you do lose your job, if you were an engineering manager in a plastics manufacturing plant, or if you were an oil rigger on a platform somewhere and you lost your job, when you came back into the job market again in Singapore, you could very easily make a comfortable living as an Uber driver in Singapore. But right now with the pandemic, the answer is no, you can't. So they're looking for other viable options. So we're going to talk about mid-career switches. And if you are at that phase in your career where you're looking at a mid-career switch, you need to ask yourself some very, very important questions. And that is something which we want to make sure that you're fully aware before you make that jump, because that jump itself is a high-risk move. Okay, I'm going to jump into the next slide. So I'll talk a bit more about myself. I am, as I said earlier, I'm the CEO, founder of Career Agility International. We've been doing this for the past 4 years. My history has been in headhunting and C-suite headhunting, and I have my own radio talk show in Singapore. And written a couple of books, and by and large, all-around fun guy. A lot of our clients just enjoy having our Friday morning coffee sessions with us virtually. But enough about me. I want to talk about mid-career switches and why it's becoming an important part of our landscape today. Today, we're going to be asking a lot of questions. I know the title says 5 questions to ask yourself. Actually, it's more like 500 you need to ask yourself. Because what we believe is that it's not always about getting the answers or getting the right answers. It's about asking the right questions. If you have the wrong answers, so if you have the right answers to the wrong question, you're still wrong. So let's begin by asking the right question. Now, what exactly is a mid-career switch? I want to just define it as a little bit about this. You see, it's about the mid-career. Our definitions is when you're between 35 to about 48, 49. Okay, that's the period where we see a lot of individuals who are questioning their career moves, questioning their career fulfillment, whether or not they're happy on their job, and they have this crossroad where they are at, and they believe that something must be done. I was not made for this. This was not what's making me happy. And therefore, they decide to do a switch. And when we talk about switch, we talk about a job change. A job change has basically 2 dimensions. You can either switch a role. For instance, if you're in HR, you move to sales, or maybe you can switch in industry. Whether or not if you're in healthcare, maybe perhaps you'll switch over to something different, like into insurance or something else. So what we are looking at is mid-career switches. But why is this even an issue? Why is mid-career switching even an issue for us to be talking about today? It's because we are seeing it very often. We are seeing this very often. A mid-career switch is a hasty move into an unfamiliar territory. Okay, and as a result, it's prone to a lot of risks. That's why we want to talk about it. Let me give you an example about a hasty move into an unfamiliar territory, and you might see that it sounds familiar. When someone comes up, or maybe the thought has entertained you, the thought has come through your mind before. Maybe I'll start my own business. Hey, I'm kind of tired of this corporate world, and I think I'll start my own business. Now that is risky. That's scary. And a bad idea sometimes reaps bad results, and sometimes a good idea sometimes reaps bad results. For instance, one of the issues at a crossroad, a lot of people feel that maybe I'll take up an MBA, and we all know that an MBA has its limitations with regards to what you want to achieve with your career. But that's another discussion for another time. And there are also misconceptions when it comes to mid-career switches, because when you mention mid-career switch to somebody, a lot of times they have an idea of a total absolute switch. Maybe I'll start a singing career. Maybe I'll start a band. And that is a huge misconception, because you don't need to make a drastic 180-degree career switch. Okay, there are ways of doing it. And one of the biggest issues we see is that sometimes if you are a mid-career person, it can be difficult to reverse or backtrack. If you take a wrong journey, down the wrong path, it's not impossible to recover from it. But sometimes some people take a longer time to do it. And because you're mid-career, you got bills to pay, you got a family to feed, and everything. So we need to approach it very, very carefully. Now, why exactly a mid-career switch? Why do people consider a mid-career switch when it comes to their career crossroads? And I want to highlight that sometimes it's not the switch alone that we need to focus on. The switch, or the desire to switch, or the thought or the idea of switching is the outcome of a trigger. Okay? It's outcome of a trigger, let me put it up, of a trigger event. These feelings sometimes, your idea of switching your career sometimes feels it lies dormant until a trigger event happens. Now, what sort of a trigger event? What do we think of when we talk about trigger event? Maybe a new boss comes in and he's making your life difficult, or maybe you're just fatigued because you've been working non-stop for many, many projects and you're just tired. Or sometimes, just being in a particular industry, in a particular role, or in a particular company for 5, 8, 10, 15 years. It just gets really boring. And one day, you wake up in the morning and you drag yourself out of bed and you go, maybe I should consider a mid-career switch because I'm just bored. And that's why a mid-career switch is often triggered. And you have to figure out what that trigger is, because sometimes making a switch does not solve that trigger. Okay, and I'll explain it to you in a little bit more detail later on. Now, when you are at a mid-career switch, you need to ask yourself several questions. Number one, is this desire to move an emotional or a rational response? I want to quit my job. I want to start that hipster cafe down the road. Is it emotional or is it rational? Does it make sense? Do I have the expertise? But more importantly, will it solve my biggest problem right now? And if my biggest problem is, for instance, burnout, will it solve? So let me give you an example. I had a client who was a banker. And he was saying that I'm so tired. I work like 100 hours a week. I've got long hours. I've got unreasonable bosses. I've got very demanding clients. And I hate my colleagues. And I want to do a mid-career switch. And he said the money is good though, but for all those reasons, I want to make a mid-career switch. And he decided to start up a cafe on somewhere near the beach. And what happened was that he ran it. After 6 months, he shut it down. And I caught up with him and I asked him, so what happened? Why did you shut down? And he said, I started up the cafe. The hours are long. The landlords are terrible. The work is unreasonable. I hate my staff. They're terrible. And the clients are very demanding. And right now, I'm not even being paid less money for that. So sometimes if you need to identify what's your biggest problem and solve it. And a mid-career switch may not solve that problem itself or may not solve the issue. And most important question you need to ask yourself as well is, am I thinking this through? Now, what are some of the legitimate questions you need to ask yourself when is it justified now? When is making a mid-career switch when is making a mid-career switch justified? And sometimes you have to make that move when you are in a sunset industry. Okay, a mid-career switch is strategically a right move if you're in a sunset industry, like for instance, publishing, newspapers, printing, or a technology that's getting grandfathered. Okay, or if you are in a space where your skills are getting obsolete. For instance, if you are in in administration, very routine administration, you know that robotic process automation is going to come in and just replace you. So you might have to do it. And one other reason why it could be justified is when you have in burnout, when you are getting very bored or burnt out with your industry. And the main reason I would say that could really justify a mid-career switch, the risk involved in a mid-career switch would be in terms of making a career pivot. And we've heard a lot about speakers talk about career pivots as well, but this time pivoting for what we call career longevity, which means that I'm going to move into an industry that's faster growing, that's going to have more runway ahead, and I will be able to stay employed for the next 10, 15, even 20 years, as opposed to right now because my industry is shrinking. So these are questions which you need to ask yourself, but are you really ready for it? If you're truly considering a career switch, you have some very pressing set of questions to answer. Number one is, am I being hasty? A lot of the bad mid-career switch decisions come up because they are hasty, or because a headhunter calls them up and say, hey, have you considered this? You should try it. It's very exciting. You should try it. But and they start flattering you, and oh wow, I'm going to try this. It's something new, but and in the end, they're not thinking it through. It becomes a spur of the moment thing, and you might regret it because it's just emotional. The second thing is, are you being realistic? Can you really do that mid-career switch? Do you really have that singing voice or the fan base that will allow you to quit your job and be a singer? Okay, and a lot of times mid-career switches unfortunately involves a pay cut. And how much of a pay cut can I tolerate? That's one question you need to ask yourself, because a lot of times when you do mid-career switch, you're new in the new industry, your skills may or may not be very relevant, and you might have to take a job that's 1 or 2 steps down, and therefore the salary will be lower. How much of a pay cut can I take, and for how long? And how much money do I have to last me while I am learning the ropes over there? Okay, and sometimes a mid-career switch involves a road to entrepreneurship, and that's another different story altogether, because the risk involved, the long hours, and the risk is not just about losing your job. It's about a monetary risk as well. So, are you ready for it? And you have to ask yourself, is it worth it? Is a move like this worth it? You have to measure the risk and the reward. What's the likelihood of me succeeding in this space? And what's the reward out of it? So that's something you need to measure. And of course, you need to have your spouse support, your spouse or your partner supporting the decision, because this is not something that you should take lightly or on your own, okay? Because a move like this is going to be longer hours, more stress, more emotional strain, and probably drama as well. So are you ready? And so for our clients who have decided that they are ready to consider a move, and I'm not talking about making a move, they're ready to consider a move, we provide them with this model of ours, which is what we call the career quadrants. Now, the crossover quadrants are something I want you to think about as the 4 possible outcomes, 4 possible hunting grounds which you want to focus your job search on. Quadrant 1 is so there are basically 2 dimensions we're looking at. The industry dimension, meaning that you either stay in your industry or you leave your industry. And then there is the role dimension, which is, do you stay in your same role or do you leave your role? For instance, if I'm in the healthcare industry, do I move to oil and gas? That's what I call an industry move. And on the horizontal axis, if I'm in HR, do I stay in HR or do I pivot into marketing, for instance? So the typical job switch, job switch, okay, is the easiest is in quadrant 1. And quadrant 1 would be in the same industry, same role, which means basically you get up, you join your competitor in the same role. So if you're a finance director in Pfizer, you get up and you walk across the street and you be the finance director at Novartis, for instance. Okay, that's the most straightforward one. But if you want to do a mid-career switch, okay, quadrant 1 is not a mid-career switch. If you want to make a mid-career switch, quadrant 2 is probably the easier one, where you stay in your same function, in the same role, but you move to a different industry, which means that if you're a finance person in oil and gas, you move over as a finance person in maybe technology. Okay, so you're still keeping your core function, your core skills, and that would be an easier switch. But if you are sometimes like a salesperson, or if you're a very technical engineer, where the skills are not transferable across industries, then you might have to consider a third crossover quadrant move. Is what we call the third quadrant move, which is you stay within the same industry, but you switch a different role. So, if you're in oil and gas, instead of being the sales guy in oil and gas, maybe you do a marketing role in oil and gas. But because of your domain knowledge and you're the expert in the industry, you're able to pivot into another role within the industry. So that's something else you can think about. Or if you really want to go all out, quadrant 4, that's why it's colored red, is a different industry, different role. Now, this quadrant 4 move is not impossible. It requires a lot of strategizing, and that's what Career Agility does for our clients. So it's not impossible, but you have to remember that a move like that is risky, and there are risk mitigation strategies that you need to deploy. I'm not going to go into that because that's a whole day lecture in itself, but generally, the reason why we provide this framework is a lot of times people say, I want to do a mid-career switch. Then you ask them, what do you want to move into? I have no idea. I don't know. Maybe this, maybe that. With this framework, we ask our clients, now, which area do you think is most suitable for you if you want to do this? Is a framework. And they go, yeah, maybe I want to stay in the same industry but different role, quadrant 3 move. Then we start mapping out, okay, same industry, what sort of roles are you good at? What sort of roles are transferable? And then you move in. Let's consider that. Or if you're thinking, I want to do a quadrant 2 move. Then we say, okay, fine, you're going to keep your role. What are the industries that are adjacent or parallel? And what are the companies there? Let's start hunting for jobs in those spaces. So that's what we call a career strategy and a job search strategy. So this is a very useful model which we use for our clients. Now, once you've decided which area to get into, the big question is, how do I get there? Now, when you ask yourself a question, it's basically, how am I qualified to jump into that role? What are the skills? Do I have the skills? How do I get sufficiently qualified? How do I have the skills that are relevant? And how do I pick up those skills and not just pick up the skills, but how do I be good at it? And a lot of times, even if you can pick up the skills, you do realize that it takes time to hone those skills to a level of proficiency where the client, where the hiring manager or the company is going to appreciate and pay you for it. So what that means is that there's also a time lag. So if you are doing a mid-career switch, don't do it on an impulse. Plan to do it about 2 or 3 years from now. And how do I pick up those skills? How do I hone and perfect those skills to the point where I will get really good at it? Okay, you can possibly do it as an evening study course, or maybe even volunteer for projects that are similar within your company. Okay, like if your company is doing a digital marketing project, raise your hand and say, I'm the supply chain guy, but hey, let me have a go at this. Okay, so you can pick up skills. But one of the biggest gaps that derails mid-career switches is just very simply the lack of information. What do you know about the industry? What do you know about that role? There's a lot of things that you didn't know. And because it's a black hole, it's a black space for you, it's a black box, you're not able to make decisions. I want to go into the data analytics space. And then say, well, because it's fast growing, what is data analytics? Which areas of data analytics? Which companies are deploying data analytics? Is it the finance? Are these the old companies or the new fintech type startups? You need to understand a lot. You need to have a lot of information. And how do you get that information? Very simply through networking. grab a friend, grab a stranger on LinkedIn, okay? Ask them, hey, can you tell me more about your industry? I'm curious. Do your research. And of course, what's important is your network as well. Because a lot of times, if you want to get into that space, you need to have the networks ready. And you need to ask a very important question. Why would they hire me? What is your pitch? What is your value proposition to them? And of course, what are your transferable skills? Why would they hire me? If you cannot answer the question of why would they hire me, then they're not going to hire you because you can't sell yourself. So if you're thinking of a mid-career switch into a totally different area, you must be very aware of your skills and what value you can bring to that organization you want to join. So that is something which we find it's very important. Now, when it comes to skills, okay, one of the things we actually suggest is you make a list of all the skills that you have. And this is a very long exercise, but look at your past career, look at all the things that you've picked up, and a lot of times you'll be surprised to find out how much skills that you actually have, and how much things that you actually know as well. So list them all down and check off the ones which you feel are transferable. And as you're doing it, ask yourself, which ones do I enjoy doing? Which ones do I want to do more of? Because some skills you're really good, but you don't want to do it. For instance, I'm really good at cold calling because at heart, I'm a salesman, okay? But I hate cold calling. I'm really good at it, but I hate it. And if someone were to pay me double the money just to do cold calling for them, the answer is probably not. So you need to know what skills you're good at and what skills you want more of, so that when you transfer over to the next job, you're going to do the things that you love doing. Now, when we talk about skills, and I want to spend a bit more time here, because the key to pivoting into another job mid-career, to do a mid-career switch, is going to be about skills. And for as long as you're unable to articulate skills, someone else who is articulating his or her skills better than you is going to get that job. So you need to understand what the skills are. And a lot of times, skills have sub-skills as well. Let me give you an example. We have a client who is a sales manager, and when you ask him what's your key skills, and he says, my key skill is sales. Ta-da! And we ask him, what exactly is sales? So, sales is just selling. I'm very good at selling stuff. And at a sales manager / sales director level, that doesn't cut it. But if you dissect your skills alone and you tease out the sub-skills, it's going to be interesting, because sales is not just about sales. Sales is about prospecting. Sales is about developing sales lists. Sales is about developing sales funnel, putting together the offering, price negotiation, go-to-market strategy. You're talking about sales team management. You're talking about pipeline management. You're talking about sales coaching for your staff. You're talking about customer success. You're talking about sales operations. So don't just go by your own skill. Whatever skill you have, if you're in finance, if you're in HR, there are a lot of sub-skills. You need to sit down and tease out what exactly are those sub-skills, and find out what are the skills that actually would be transferable to another company, okay, another organization. Let me give you another interesting example. We had a client who was in the fast-moving consumer goods, because my background has been in headhunting. So when my client was in fast-moving consumer goods in condiments. It's one of the biggest condiment company in the world. US-based condiment company. You can probably guess which one it is. They wanted to get into the Asian market really in a really huge way. And one of the things they wanted to do was they were looking for a marketing director. But one of their key areas which they wanted to do was they realized they wanted to go on a Tupperware type model. If you remember Tupperware, they will get homemakers together and they will sell to each other. It was a membership type thrust that they were doing globally. So this condiments company wanted someone who was a marketeer. And originally they asked me, okay, look for all the fast-moving consumer goods competitors and let's pull all these guys in and hunt for the marketing director from that space. And I paused and I said, wait a minute, what's the core skill that's needed here? The core skill that's actually needed here is not just the marketing, because the person doesn't really need to have FMCG or fast-moving consumer goods or condiment experience. What this person needs is very targeted customer acquisition and membership. So what we did was we actually pulled out a person from American Express card, Amex, with zero experience in fast-moving consumer goods at all. We pulled her out and we put her into the role and she got it. And the reason why she got it was because Amex does wonderful membership marketing. And for that individual, the marketing director that we pulled out, it was a mid-career switch for her. She had basically done a quadrant 2 move, one industry to another industry, from banking and finance, which is Amex, into that space, which is fast-moving consumer goods. Okay, so what we're trying to say is this: if you can identify your core skill, which you're really good at, and see who else would buy that skill, that is one of the first stepping stones to doing a quadrant 2, quadrant 3, or even a quadrant 4 type of move. And that is how we get you get to move from one area, your comfort zone, to something that's different. Okay, so now, in summary, I'm keeping this short because I think you'll probably have a lot of questions. So I want to spend more time answering questions. If you do think about making a mid-career switch, okay, it's not always a bad idea. Do not listen, and yet do not listen to the people giving you advice. Make sure the person giving you advice is an expert, okay? Because it's mid-career switches scares people to the point where people just tell you, no, just stay where you are. It's safe. Don't risk it. Now, mid-career switches is not always a bad idea. In fact, a mid-career switch at your point in your life might be crucial, might be critical, because as I said earlier, if your industry is shrinking, or if your skill set is getting obsolete, or maybe sometimes you're just bored, silly, and you really want to move to something to have more learnings. And sometimes also, if you're in the same role for too long, it works against you in terms of being employable. So mid-career switches is not always a bad idea, but having said that, it's not easy either. It's not easy, but it is possible. And it has a lot of risks involved. So, one thing I always say is that whenever people tell me, is it risky? I won't do it because it's risky. And I always tell them, look, crossing the road is risky. If you were to cross the road, you never know. A car might just barrel down right from the corner, careen, and just hit you. So does that mean you don't cross the road? Does that mean you don't get out of the house? It's all about risk mitigation. So that's why take your time, okay, to understand what the risks are. How do I reduce the risk? Even something like just talking to someone who's already been in that space. Is it a growing industry? Now, is this industry fun as people say it is? Find out, talk. And the whole idea is plan. You have to think it through. It's very critical that you don't make a hasty move. And that is that's one of the biggest things that people trip up over, because they fail to plan. And when they fail to plan, they as the old saying goes, they plan, their plans will fail. So what we want to talk about is this: if you need help, seek help. Talk to your mentors. Talk about in terms of ask him, is it a good move? Let me share with you an interesting idea if you're planning a mid-career switch. And this is something we share quite openly with a lot of the general population and of people on LinkedIn as well. If you're really thinking of mid-career switch, and oftentimes you want to do it, but you have no idea as to where you want to go, look up your old colleagues, look up your old bosses, and just stalk them on LinkedIn. Where have they gone? Have they successfully pivoted to another industry? So if you are in pharmaceuticals, if you're in drugs, as in medicine, not the drug, okay, if you're in the drug industry, and if you look at your ex-bosses, have they pivoted to, maybe the medical devices, or maybe they've pivoted to over-the-counter type medications, or maybe even nutraceuticals. Say, that's interesting. Yeah. Hey, Johnny, my old colleague, he's now the MD, the managing director of this other company, He successfully switched over. Hey, let me call him and ask him how he did it. Wasn't easy. And maybe even ask him, are you hiring? Because I have the same skill sets and I could help you. Okay. So one of the biggest tips I would give you is that to fill up that lack of information, that void, start talking to people. Talk to your ex-bosses, ex-colleagues, and talk to them and find out where have they moved into, because they've succeeded and possibly you could too. So in summary, we talk about, what's next. So I would like you to think about, if you're thinking about making a career switch, okay, number one, make a plan. Very important, you must make a plan. You don't do it on the fly, because it's gonna crash. It normally entails, a move like this normally entails skills acquisition. So you need to ask yourself, what skills are needed in that role? And of course, you also need to figure out, the people will need to know you before they hire you. So how do I network my way into that space? Number two is you need to be able to get advice. So talk to people. As I said, talk to coaches. Now, I want to make a caveat here. Not every career coach you meet is able to do mid-career switches, career strategy switching like this. This is a very specialized practice field, okay? So a lot of coaches, they're still talking about CVs, they're talking about LinkedIn, they're talking about what font size a CV should be, or how do I beat the applicant tracking system. Those are great coaches for that, but this is not a tactical move, this is a strategic move. And very few coaches can do that. If you have any questions, just talk to me and I'll be happy to point you in the right direction. But more importantly, as a parting piece of advice, I want you to think about taking action. Okay, it's not enough to just say, I want to do it someday. It's not enough to just say, I want to do it 5 years from now or 10 years from now, and therefore I'll cross the bridge when I get to it. It's not. So I want you to start thinking about what actions can I do today that can help facilitate my move into another industry or another role 2 years, 5 years, or even 10 years from now. Okay. And I want to wish you all good luck on your journey. And if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
That was fantastic, Adrian. Thank you so much. But really heed Adrian's advice there. It's not something that every coach can do. This is, it's not sort of generic advice around how to be found by recruiters and all that sort of stuff, which is all great advice, right? Nothing wrong with that advice. But if you're looking for someone specifically to do what Adrian's been coaching on, you need someone who's got experience in just that, like Adrian does. So please do reach out to Adrian as we go through. So Adrian's details are here. Do you mind if I just close that window for now and we take some questions?
Let's do that.
Let's do it. Right. Thank you for that. Hello. You're right.
Hello again. Okay. Good morning.
It's actually.
You're still awake.
I think I've just gone past tired. I think I could do another 24 hours. Actually, no, I don't mean that at all. I don't mean that. So we have a couple of questions that have come through.
Oh, yes.
So from Alex here, do you consider mid-career switch to be synonymous with midlife crisis? Do they relate to each other?
That's a very good question, because we had a talk on this, exactly this, 3 weeks ago with our clients. Midlife crisis has a lot of issues involved. Career is just one of them. A lot of times it meets, there's a confluence, but a lot of times it isn't. So if you are in a midlife crisis, sometimes it's way beyond just a career piece. It's your emotional, it's everything else, the meaning of life. Why do I have 9 cats in my house? Things like that. So that could, I would recommend, if you are in a midlife crisis, put the career on hold, solve the other elements first, because the career issue is more readily solved in a way. But the more appropriate term I would use is actually a mid-career crisis. Because sometimes, if you're in a career and job-wise, you're in your 35 and 40. And if you look at it this way, okay, I want to provide some context. We start work at, say, about 25. Okay, just say 25. And we retire maybe about 65, because I do not know what's the retirement age over there in the UK, Neil?
I think it's 65, but I think it's going up to 70.
It's going up. It never stops.
But don't bother retiring, I think, is what's going to happen by the time I'm that age.
I think so. But if you look at it, if you look at 25 to 65, what's exactly is the midway point? It's 45. So if you're way before 45 or even at 45, there's still another good 20 years left. So that's actually the zone where the mid-career crisis pops up. And that's also the zone where it gets very painful, because that's where you have kids, you have a mortgage and everything. So you have to be very mindful and very careful when it comes to that.
Yeah, fantastic. Again, a really good answer. I hope that's answered your question, Alex. We've got another question here from Ingela. I hope I'm saying your name right there. Because you were talking about triggers before. Can't one trigger be long-time unemployment, and you can get into your old business or the business you want, or because of lack of experience? If you want to reread any of these questions, you can just click ask a question down at the bottom.
Okay, sorry, I didn't really catch that question. Angelique, do you want to ask a question again?
Yeah. So if you click ask a question down at the bottom, you can read it. But I think can't one trigger be long-time unemployment, and you can't get into your old business or the business you want because of lack of experience?
Okay, Ingela. Okay, yeah, it is true, and that's why sometimes you are forced to think about what else is there out in the market, and it's also very difficult. One of the more challenging types of clients we have are returning moms who have taken a break, a career break to look after their kids, about 3 to 5 years, and then they're trying to get back into the industry again. And for them, that is a mid-career switch as well. And it's particularly complex for the moms, for the ladies, because for them, it's not just about a mid-career switch. It's about an identity crisis as well. Am I a mom? Do I stay a mom? Do I stay a mom even as I'm moving into that role? And I can tell you that because one of my staff, her name is Valerie. She's experiencing that right now, and we brought her in, and she's worked her way through it, and she was sharing with us about balancing in a crisis. And one thing that hit me, because I'm just a guy, right, is this thing about the identity. And I think maybe the ladies here might even have a better idea on this than me trying to mansplain it. But it's yes. So sometimes it's out of necessity that the trigger happens, and you have to make the move. And one of the things I always say is that you have to make that effort to move. If you don't move, sometimes staying where you are is not a solution either, not a long-term solution.
Yeah, completely agreed. We've got another question that's come through from Gabriella. Do you think confidence has a lot to do with a career change? How do you handle people who have given up on the change because they feel insecure?
Now, there are two things we need to think about. One is, if you're insecure, my advice is it's fine, because a lot of us have our insecurities, even me. Okay,
Me too.
And yeah, we all do, and it's human nature. Insecurity is just our primal brain telling us, stay safe, don't try it because you could get hurt. Do not pet the alligator because it's dangerous. So don't go near the alligator. Okay, it's our mind telling us to be safe. So insecurity is one thing. Insecurity about even exploring versus insecurity about I've explored but I don't dare to make the jump. My advice is for insecurity. Okay, number one, speak to someone who's an expert in this space. Someone who can give you good career advice. But number two, if you're insecure and you're unsure, okay, take baby steps, small steps. If you want to move, for instance, if you're a stay-at-home mom and you want to move into the corporate world, okay, what we did with Valerie is that she was a stay-at-home mom and a trailing spouse for about 9 years. Okay, and she's going back to the market now. We first brought her in part-time. So she was working 3 mornings a week for about 3 months. She liked what she was seeing. She was very nervous at first. And she liked what she was seeing. We loved her. We told her, look, let's extend it a little. And now she's on full-time. So if you're insecure and unsure, it's perfectly normal. Just take the baby steps. And you never know where it goes, but take action.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. It's not about having that long-term goal, is it? That one massive outcome.
Yeah.
I've got a good example of this. About 10 hours ago, I was just trying to get through the next hour. The thought of getting through the full 24 was way too much. Now, obviously, slightly less serious. But it's about. But from a serious standpoint, it's about keeping those short-term goals. Taking those baby steps, and not. If you wake up on a Monday morning, you think, right, my goal is to do a career change. There's so many steps in between.
Yeah.
That goal and what you need to do, that it's really important to break it down into those steps. So yeah, completely agree with that. Fantastic answer. Yeah. We've got another question from Stephen here. Would a halfway and less risky point potentially be a portfolio career? It's a question from Stephen.
Yes, I think A portfolio career, for those of us who are not familiar with that term, is basically instead of having one job from one company, drawing one salary, you are doing gigs, separate gigs. So you're doing like 2 days, you're doing with company A in a particular role, and on Wednesday and Thursday, you're working with company B on another project, and on Friday, you're doing maybe some church work or something else for free. And it works together as a portfolio career. So the answer is yes. A portfolio. We are actually seeing a lot of our clients who move into a portfolio career. Okay, and it could potentially be a good move. And in fact, interestingly, a portfolio career could give you a sampler of what is the industry that you actually would like doing. So, you could do after about a year, 12 months or 16 months or 18 months doing various gigs. And you say, actually, I like doing this with this company. Or maybe you're doing that particular job so well, the company says, hey, why don't you come about full-time? Like Valerie and us, just come about full-time and do it. So a portfolio career could be a good segue into a career switch. Fantastic point.
And fantastic answer as well. So we've got to move on to the next, and we don't have any more questions, Adrian. Thank you so much for your time. If people want to find you, how do they find you?
Well, they can just reach out to me on LinkedIn and just say hi, or just drop me an email at info@careeragility.org. That's my email address. And any other questions you have, just drop me a note. I'll be happy to answer you.
Adrian, thank you so much for your time. That was really insightful. I really love it. Thank you so much.
Okay, thanks, Neil. Have a good rest after this.
I will. We've got Jeanette on next, and then I'm straight to rest. Thank you so much.
Okay. Have a great day ahead. Happy Easter.